What happens when Hollywood's most unshakable man, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, finally loses his cool on live television? When the charm, the laughter, and the calm exterior fracture under the sharp edge of a daytime talk show host's provocation. You're about to find out. The morning began like any other taping of The View. The studio was buzzing, lights warming the faces of the hosts, the audience murmuring with that electric hum of anticipation. Joy Behar was in her usual seat, leaning forward with her trademark grin, a mix of charm and mischief. Beside her, Whoopi Goldberg adjusted her glasses, calmly flipping through her cue cards. Sunny Hostin and Sarah Haynes chatted quietly between takes. And then the man himself walked in. Dwayne Johnson. He entered the studio with that signature rock presence, confident, larger than life, but smiling, greeting everyone with handshakes and hugs. The audience erupted the moment they saw him. Some stood, phones already up, recording as he waved. He looked every bit the superstar, crisp gray jacket over a fitted black tee, the veins in his arms hinting at power even in stillness. But beneath that composure, something else lingered. Attention! He was there to promote his upcoming film, a gritty action drama about loyalty, redemption, and fatherhood. The kind of film that blurred the line between his Hollywood persona and his real-life resilience. Yet, behind that smile, Dwayne had been on edge all week. Rumors had been swirling. Accusations, political comments taken out of context, an online backlash, and Joy Behar had promised to ask the tough questions. The producers wanted fireworks. They got an inferno. As the cameras rolled, the intro music faded. Joy looked across the table, already sharpening her tone. "So, Dwayne," she began, her voice sweet but with a hint of that Behar bite, "you've always been this big, lovable guy, America's action hero. But lately, some fans think you've changed." Dwayne's jaw flexed. A subtle smile remained, but his eyes flickered with awareness. "Well, Joy," he said evenly, "I think people change when they grow, right? I've learned a lot in the past few years about family, business, and, the world we're living in." Joy leaned closer. "Sure. But what about your comments last week? You said you're tired of, quote, Hollywood's fake politics. Some people thought you were talking about this show." The audience chuckled awkwardly. Dwayne tilted his head, lips curling into that polite half-smile. "I wasn't talking about anyone in particular, Joy. But I do think Hollywood needs more honesty. Fewer masks." "Fewer masks," Joy repeated, her grin tightening. "Well, that's ironic, coming from an actor." The crowd reacted with gasps and laughter, a ripple of shock cutting through the room. Dwayne laughed softly, but it wasn't his usual hearty laugh. It was restrained, sharp, almost surgical. "Joy," he said slowly, "there's a difference between playing a role and living one." Whoopi's eyes flickered between them, sensing the heat rise. All right, let's not start World War III, she interjected, her tone playful but her expression serious. Joy chuckled. "I'm just saying, he's the one talking about fake people, right? We're just trying to understand what that means." Dwayne took a breath, leaning forward slightly. His voice lowered, becoming more deliberate, the way he speaks in his motivational videos, but this time the message wasn't about positivity. "It means," he said, "sometimes people wear opinions the way they wear outfits, to fit in. And when you don't play along, you get labeled the bad guy." The studio went quiet. Even Joy paused. The tension was thick enough to taste. "Are you calling us fake?" she asked, tilting her head. He smiled again. "I'm saying if the shoe fits, Joy." The audience exploded. Gasps, laughs, applause. It was chaos. Cameras caught Sarah Haynes covering her mouth in disbelief, while Sunny whispered something to Whoopi. But Joy wasn't backing down. "You know what, Dwayne? You sound like every guy who can't take criticism. You dish it out, but the moment someone pushes back, you get defensive." Dwayne's tone hardened, the warmth fading. "No, Joy. I can take criticism. What I don't take is disrespect." Silence. It was one of those live TV moments when even the crew stopped moving. You could almost hear the hum of the stage lights. Whoopi leaned in, her voice calm but edged. "Okay, let's take a breath. This is The View, not the Octagon." The audience laughed nervously. Joy forced a smile, but she was rattled. She tried to pivot. "All right, let's talk about your movie then. It's about a father trying to protect his son, right? Very emotional, very personal. I heard you cried during filming. Is that true?" The shift was transparent, an attempt to recover. But Dwayne wasn't ready to let her off the hook. "Yeah, I did cry," he said quietly, "because it reminded me what real strength looks like. It's not about ego or proving you're right. It's about standing for something. Something real. The way he emphasized real hit like a punch. Joy laughed again, a touch too loud. Well, I'm glad you can cry. Maybe next time you can cry about your interviews too. The audience didn't laugh. The energy had turned. Dwayne looked down, smiled faintly, then met her eyes, that calm before the storm stare that millions recognize from his wrestling days. You know, Joy, I came here because I respect this platform, he said, voice low and steady. But what you're doing right now, trying to make a joke out of something personal, that's not journalism. That's cheap entertainment. Joy blinked. The audience gasped again. Whoopi shifted in her seat, clearly torn between defending Joy and stopping the fire from spreading. All right, let's bring it back, she said. We're not here to fight, we're here to talk about. But Dwayne wasn't finished. No, Whoopi, I'm good, he said, leaning back in his chair. I've done a lot of interviews, a lot of press. I can handle tough questions. But there's a line. And when someone crosses it, I'm not going to sit here and smile through it. The audience clapped, not all of them, but enough to make it echo. Joy tried to keep composure, but her eyes darted to the camera crew, unsure if they were still live. They were. Every second of this was rolling. You think I crossed the line? She asked finally. Dwayne nodded slowly. Yeah, and I think you knew exactly what you were doing. It was like the air got sucked out of the room. Sarah and Sunny exchanged nervous glances. Whoopi looked at the producer booth off camera. Dwayne sat still, composed, but with an intensity that radiated off him like heat. For a moment, no one said a word. Then the studio audience, some uneasy, some exhilarated, broke into murmurs. Phones rose discreetly again. People sensed something bigger was happening. Joy looked down at her notes, exhaled sharply, and forced another smile. All right, she said. Let's go to break. The music cue hit, but the audience knew this wasn't over. As the lights dimmed for commercial, Dwayne remained seated, his expression calm but his eyes distant. Joy avoided his gaze. Whoopi whispered something under her breath, shaking her head. The cameras went off, but the drama didn't stop there. Because off-air, in that tense, echoing silence, Joy turned toward him, voice low but biting. You think you can come on this show and lecture me? I've been doing this longer than you've been acting. And Dwayne, without even looking at her, replied, Yeah, maybe that's the problem. The floor manager's voice broke the silence. We're back in 60 seconds. Whoopi rubbed her temples. Sarah muttered, Oh my God. The audience watched every subtle movement. Dwayne sat forward, elbows on his knees, face composed again. But that inner storm, the one he'd kept buried under charm and politeness, was rising. When the cameras came back, the view would never be the same. And neither would Dwayne Johnson's public image. When the cameras came back, the air felt different. The applause sign flashed, but the clapping was weak, hesitant, nervous. Everyone on set could sense it. The audience wasn't just watching a celebrity interview anymore. They were watching the edge of an eruption. Dwayne sat still, jaw tight, shoulders squared. Joy adjusted her papers, pretending to read, but her hands trembled slightly. Whoopi leaned forward, trying to reclaim control. Welcome back to The View, she said, her tone forced cheerful. We're still here with Dwayne Johnson, talking about his new movie Legacy Road. The camera framed Dwayne in a tight shot. His eyes didn't leave Joy. He smiled faintly, not angry yet, but dangerous in his calm. Yeah, he said quietly. Let's talk about Legacy. Joy laughed lightly, forcing her trademark humor back into play. Yes, Legacy. I mean, you've got one, right? From wrestling to Hollywood, to, what is it now, politics? The crowd tittered. Dwayne's smile froze. Politics, he asked. Well, Joy said, shrugging innocently, you've been very vocal lately. You've made a few statements that some might call controversial. Whoopi's eyebrows lifted. Joy, she warned softly. But Joy kept going, emboldened by the attention. You said you're tired of people pretending to be perfect. That Hollywood is fake. I think some people might say that's rich, coming from someone who built a career on image. The line landed like a slap. The audience murmured, half shocked, half thrilled. Dwayne exhaled slowly, then leaned in, voice dropping just enough for the microphones to catch the gravity. You know, Joy, he said, when I talk about Hollywood being fake, I'm not talking about people doing their jobs. I'm talking about people losing their integrity, trading respect for headlines. Joy smirked. You mean like this one? The crowd gasped again. Even Whoopi's hand shot up. Okay, stop. Let's take this down a notch, she said. We're not trying to make this personal. Dwayne looked at her and nodded respectfully. I know, Whoopi. But when someone questions your integrity on live TV, it becomes personal. He turned back to Joy. You've been doing this a long time. You know how words cut. So let's not play innocent now. The audience clapped. It wasn't polite applause. It was the kind of raw, spontaneous energy that fills a room when someone finally says what everyone's thinking. Joy crossed her arms. So what, you're saying I'm the problem? That I can't ask questions. I'm saying you can ask anything you want, Dwayne replied. But when you ask with an agenda, it's not curiosity, it's theater. The audience oohed. The line landed hard. Whoopi sighed, muttering under her breath, Lord, give me strength. Joy leaned forward, voice low. You're not the first celebrity to get defensive here. You won't be the last. Dwayne's stare didn't waver. Then maybe the show should start learning from that. The tension was suffocating. Even the crew had stopped moving. Every eye was locked on the table, waiting for what would happen next. Whoopi jumped in again, trying to cut through. Let's move to something positive, okay? You've got this big movie coming, and fans are saying it's your most emotional performance yet. But Dwayne interrupted, his voice still calm but colder now. See, that's the thing. I came here to talk about that. The movie, the work, the craft. But it seems like every time I sit at this table, the real goal isn't the conversation, it's the confrontation. Joy shook her head. Oh, come on, that's not fair. It's honest, he said. She threw up her hands. You're an actor. You're used to critics. If a little question rattles you, maybe you're not as tough as you look. That line did it. The audience gasped so loudly it almost drowned out the sound tech's cough. Dwayne smiled, not warmly but with that dangerous calm. Joy, he said softly, you've got guts. I'll give you that. But don't confuse composure with weakness. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. The energy shifted. You could feel the balance of power tilt. The audience was no longer laughing with joy. They were watching her try to recover from a punch she didn't see coming. Sarah Haynes broke the silence with a nervous laugh. Okay, wow. This got intense real fast. Whoopi rubbed her temples. We're making TV history again, she muttered. Joy forced another laugh. Look, Dwayne, don't get me wrong. I respect you. But if you can't handle a few jokes. Dwayne cut her off. It's not the jokes, Joy. It's the intent behind them. There's a difference between humor and humiliation. You've built a career on walking that line, but sometimes you cross it. The room froze. Joy tried to deflect. So now you're judging my career? Dwayne's voice dropped an octave. No, I'm reminding you that words matter. The way you talk about people matters. The audience clapped again, louder this time. Whoopi leaned back, exhaling. Well, this is definitely not the interview we planned. Joy's smile faltered. You know what, Dwayne? Maybe you should stick to action movies. They don't require this much sensitivity. He laughed, quietly, but with that unmistakable note of finality. And maybe you should stick to comedy. It's safer when it's not aimed at people's character. The crowd went wild. Cheers, laughter, even a few whistles. Someone in the back yelled, Damn! Whoopi held up her hand, but she was laughing too, more in disbelief than amusement. Okay, that's enough, she said. We're not turning the View into a wrestling ring. But the moment was already viral before the segment even ended. Clips were being recorded, phones discreetly filming the tension between them. Joy forced a smile for the camera. All right, she said through clenched teeth. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned. The theme music hit again, but the studio audience didn't clap this time. They were whispering, buzzing, feeding off the electricity of what they'd just seen. As soon as the lights dimmed for the break, Joy turned to Dwayne, her voice sharp and low. You embarrassed me. He didn't flinch. No, he said. You embarrassed yourself. She glared at him, face flushed, but Dwayne didn't look away. He just sat there, perfectly still, like a man who had already decided he wasn't going to apologize. Sarah looked between them, visibly uncomfortable. This is gonna trend, she whispered to Sonny. Sonny nodded. It already is. Off stage, producers were panicking. Phones ringing, social media managers already typing, camera operators glancing nervously toward the control booth. Whoopi leaned toward Joy. Let it go, she said quietly. You're not going to win this one. But Joy just stared ahead, jaw tight, her pride stinging. And in that moment, the silent seconds before the next segment started, everyone knew something irreversible had happened. Dwayne Johnson had come to the View to promote a movie. But what he left with was something much bigger. A televised confrontation that would shatter his always smiling image and reveal something raw, real, and utterly unfiltered. Because when the cameras came back again, Dwayne wouldn't hold back anymore. The third segment began with that same uneasy energy, the kind that crawls under the skin and sits heavy in the air. You could almost hear the audience's nerves. They knew what had just happened wasn't part of any script. As the theme music faded, Joy plastered on her signature grin. But the tension behind it was unmistakable. Her eyes were sharper now, voice slightly higher as she addressed the viewers. "We're back on The View with Dwayne Johnson," she said. "And I think it's fair to say things got a little heated before the break." The audience gave a scattered, awkward laugh. Whoopi leaned in, voice firm but kind. "We keep it real here," she said, glancing at Dwayne. "Sometimes that means the conversations get a little uncomfortable." Dwayne nodded politely, his expression calm again, but his eyes were cold, focused. "That's what real conversations are supposed to be," he said. "Uncomfortable." The words hung there. Even Joy didn't interrupt this time. He continued, his voice steady, deep, controlled, like someone walking a tightrope between restraint and revelation. "I've done interviews all over the world," he said. "Some easy, some tough. But the difference between tough questions and disrespect is intention. When you invite someone to your table, you can challenge them, sure. But if the goal is to make them look small, that says more about the host than the guest." The audience erupted in applause. It wasn't just polite now. It was loud, emotional, the kind that vibrates through a studio. Joy forced a smile, her knuckles white around her coffee mug. "Oh, come on," she said. "You think I'm trying to make you look small? You're The Rock, for God's sake. Nobody can make you look small." Dwayne's lips twitched in a brief, humorless smile. "You'd be surprised how far ego can stretch when someone's feeling threatened." That landed. Even Whoopi raised her eyebrows at that one. Sarah Haynes, who had been silent for most of the segment, finally spoke up. "Look, I just want to say, this is one of the most real conversations we've had on the show. It's uncomfortable, but I think people at home appreciate it." Sunny nodded in agreement. "Yeah, people need to see that vulnerability and strength aren't opposites. You can stand up for yourself without being angry or defensive." Dwayne turned toward them, his expression softening. "Exactly," he said. "I'm not angry. I'm just tired of people assuming silence equals agreement. Sometimes staying calm is the loudest way to say, 'I'm done playing along.'" The audience clapped again, this time standing. The applause grew, real, unscripted, rolling through the studio like a wave. Joy's smile faltered. You could see it, that moment of realization that the energy in the room had shifted away from her. She forced a laugh. All right. You win, Dwayne." But he shook his head. "This isn't about winning, Joy. It's about being heard." The words were simple, but the sincerity behind them hit hard. The audience quieted, some visibly emotional. Whoopi leaned back, almost impressed by how Dwayne had turned the room. Not through aggression, but through truth. Joy tried to pivot again, to regain footing. "You know, people say you're one of the most likable stars in Hollywood," she said. "Do you worry moments like this might change that image?" Dwayne's eyes met hers, unwavering. "If being honest changes how people see me," he said, "then maybe the image was never real to begin with." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the camera operators seemed frozen. And then, from the back row, someone in the audience shouted, "Tell her Rock." The room erupted. Laughter, cheers, applause. The energy was wild now, uncontrollable. Joy tried to speak over it, but her voice was drowned out. Okay, calm down, everyone," she said, waving her hands. Dwayne chuckled softly, shaking his head. "It's all love," he said to the audience, smiling again. "We can disagree, but we don't have to disrespect each other." Whoopi clapped her hands once, breaking the tension. "That's it. That's the line of the day." But Joy wasn't ready to let it go. "All right, then let me ask you this," she said quickly. "You talk about respect, but don't you think calling out people on air is the same kind of disrespect?" Dwayne turned slowly to face her fully. "No," he said, "because I'm not hiding behind jokes or applause signs. I'm looking you in the eye and telling you the truth." Joy blinked, caught off guard. "You invited me here," he continued. "You wanted authenticity. This is it. I'm not going to sit in a chair and smile while someone twists words or plays to the crowd. I respect this platform. I respect the audience. But respect works both ways." The crowd started clapping again. It wasn't just support, it was release. Every viewer in that room could feel the honesty crackling through the air like electricity. Whoopi gave a half smile. "Well," she said, I think that's as real as it gets. Dwayne leaned back, his expression finally softening. That's all it ever needed to be, he said. Joy took a sip of her coffee, finally quiet. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. The cameras lingered on her face, the professional smile fading into something more human, something uncertain. Then Dwayne turned back to the audience, speaking directly to them. You know, we live in a time where everyone's performing, he said. Online, on TV, even off camera. But the truth is, people crave something real. They're tired of the noise, tired of pretending. You could hear the emotion in his tone now. It wasn't anger, it was conviction. I've played heroes on screen, but real strength isn't about muscles or fame. It's about knowing who you are, even when people try to make you question it. The audience rose to their feet. The cheers were thunderous. Some people even wiped their eyes. Joy sat there, silent, watching as Dwayne's words swallowed the entire room. She looked almost small, not humiliated, just humbled. Whoopi, for once, was speechless. The camera panned across the crowd, faces glowing under the stage lights, people clapping, shouting his name. It wasn't just admiration. It was resonance. And then, right before the segment cut to break, Dwayne looked into the camera, into every viewer's living room, and said quietly, "Respect is earned, not demanded." The show cut to commercial. But the moment didn't end. As soon as the red light went off, the audience erupted into chatter. Producers scrambled in the control booth. One whispered, "We're trending already." Another said, "Don't cut his mic whatever happens next, we need it." Joy leaned forward, exhaling hard. "Well," she muttered, "you certainly know how to make a scene." Dwayne smirked faintly. "No, Joy. I just know how to tell the truth." Whoopi stood, adjusting her glasses. "All right, folks. This last segment's going to be interesting," she said under her breath. And as Dwayne sat there, calm again, hands folded, the whole studio buzzed with the kind of energy that comes before an explosion. The final act was coming. The gloves were off. And when the cameras came back, Dwayne Johnson wouldn't just defend himself. He'd expose the game everyone had been playing all along. When the cameras flicked back on for the final segment, the studio felt charged, alive, dangerous. It wasn't just another daytime show anymore. It was something raw, unpredictable, human. The applause sign blinked, but the audience didn't need prompting. They clapped because they could feel that something big was about to happen. Joy Behar adjusted her chair, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She knew she had to finish strong, to regain control, to pull the show back into her world. But the balance had shifted completely. Across from her sat Dwayne Johnson, still poised, looking as though he carried every ounce of the tension in the room with perfect, deliberate calm. Whoopi leaned toward the camera. "Welcome back to The View," she said, her voice steady, almost warning. "Before the break, we had quite a discussion, and I think we're going to keep it real for a few more minutes." A few nervous laughs trickled from the audience. Joy took her cue, her voice firm but slightly strained. "Yes, we are," she said. "Dwayne, I want to thank you for staying open, even though this conversation got, let's say, spirited." Dwayne smiled faintly. "Spirited's a good word," he said. The tone was light, but the air wasn't. Every person in the studio, crew, producers, audience, was silently pleading for the segment to end without another explosion. But Dwayne wasn't done. He'd been quiet for too long, and this was his moment to say what so many people had felt about the way these shows worked. "Joy," he began, his voice smooth, calm, but deliberate. "I respect what you do. I know your job isn't easy. But there's a difference between having a conversation with someone and creating one about them." Joy tilted her head. "You think that's what I did?" Dwayne nodded once. "Yeah, I think sometimes shows like this, not just yours, forget that behind every headline there's a person. We've all seen it. Clips get taken out of context, words twisted, jokes turned into judgment. That's not conversation. That's manipulation." The audience reacted instantly, gasps, murmurs, a few scattered claps. Whoopi sighed, rubbing her temples again. "You're not wrong," she admitted softly. "But this is live TV, baby. The line between truth and entertainment's been blurry for a long time." Dwayne looked at her, his eyes steady. "Maybe it's time someone drew the line again." That line hit like thunder. The audience erupted, clapping, cheering, some even shouting his name. The sound filled every corner of the studio. Joy sat back, her lips parting in disbelief as Dwayne continued. "I came here to talk about a movie," he said. "But what we ended up talking about is bigger than that. It's about respect, honesty, and what it means to stand up when the easy thing to do is stay quiet." I think the public's tired. Tired of watching people pretend to care while they build careers tearing others down. The applause grew louder, more emotional now. Joy tried to regain her footing. You're saying we tear people down? That's not fair, Dwayne. We give everyone a platform to speak. He nodded slowly. Sure, but sometimes that platform turns into a spotlight, and instead of light, it burns. Whoopi whispered, Lord, under her breath, shaking her head with a small, stunned smile. Joy's tone hardened. You know, Dwayne, you're a big guy. Maybe you can handle the heat. But not everyone has your privilege. When people come here, they know what they're signing up for. It's the View. We ask real questions. Dwayne's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The strength in his tone carried through the entire studio. Real questions are fine, he said. But real questions don't come with judgment already baked in. You can challenge someone without trying to humiliate them. The audience clapped again, this time almost rhythmically, their energy rising with each word he spoke. Joy opened her mouth, then stopped. For once, she had no comeback. Dwayne leaned back, his gaze sweeping across the room, over the faces of the hosts, the cameras, the crowd. You know what I've learned? He said quietly. People don't forget how you make them feel. You can talk for an hour or a lifetime, but at the end of the day, they remember if you made them feel seen or small. That silence again, heavy, electric, sacred. Even Joy didn't interrupt. Whoopi, watching him, nodded slowly. You got a point, Rock, she said. And I'll say this. That's probably the most honest thing this table's heard in a long time. Dwayne smiled faintly. Then it was worth saying. And just like that, the room exhaled. The tension broke, not with a joke, not with a fake laugh, but with understanding. You could feel it. Even the audience softened, their cheers melting into something warmer, more respectful. Joy straightened her papers again, trying to shift the tone. Well, she said, I think we've all learned something today. Dwayne chuckled. Yeah, he said. Maybe next time we'll call it the real View. The crowd roared, laughter, applause, a standing ovation. Joy tried to smile, and this time it was genuine, if only slightly. Even she had to admit, he'd handled himself with grace, even as he dismantled her entire approach. Whoopi stood up, laughing. All right, we're wrapping before the building explodes, she said. Dwayne Johnson, everybody. The applause was thunderous. The camera panned to Dwayne as he stood, shaking Whoopi's hand, then Joy's. She met his eyes, tired, but not angry now. There was respect in her look, unspoken but real. When the segment ended and the cameras cut, chaos followed. Producers rushed the stage, crew members high-fived, social media managers were already flooding X and Instagram with clips. Within minutes, Dwayne Johnson The View was trending worldwide. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag The Rock Speaks Truth. Hashtag Joy Behar clapped back. Hashtag Respect Matters. News outlets picked it up before the show had even finished airing. Some headlines praised Dwayne for calling out daytime hypocrisy. Others accused him of turning on the media that made him. But no one could deny it. The moment had gone viral. By nightfall, clips of the confrontation were everywhere. Millions of views. Endless commentary. Celebrities weighed in. Fans argued online. Half the internet sided with Dwayne, the other half defended Joy. But one thing was clear. The View had just been shaken to its core. In interviews that followed, Whoopi downplayed it as a passionate exchange. Joy, more candid, admitted, he got me. I pushed too far. And Dwayne, ever calm, ever composed, posted a single message on social media. Respect doesn't require agreement. Just understanding. It was liked over 6 million times. Days later, when reporters asked if he'd ever return to The View, Dwayne just smiled. Only if they're ready for another real conversation, he said. And somewhere, in the endless scroll of reactions and opinions, one truth stood out. For the first time in a long while, a celebrity interview hadn't been about selling something. It had been about something that mattered. The confrontation changed the tone of talk shows for weeks. Some praised it as a wake-up call. Others called it ego. But the world had watched a man refuse to bow to the unwritten rule of smiling through discomfort, and they loved him for it. The moment became more than viral. It became a statement. Because when Dwayne Johnson fired back at Joy Behar on The View, it wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a collision between truth and performance, between the mask and the man. And in that moment, truth won. If you were watching, you witnessed something rare, real emotion, live and unfiltered. And now it's your turn. What do you think? Was Dwayne right to stand his ground, or did Joy just do her job? Let us know your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Prime Narrator for more cinematic celebrity moments that go beyond the headlines, where the masks fall and the truth speaks loudest. Because sometimes live TV isn't scripted, it's legendary.